Okay, so we're starting. Hello, this is Mike. I'm Michael Makovsky, the President and CEO of JINSA. Thank you very much for joining us for our weekly discussion about the war in Israel South, North, and in the region. I'm joined by, as often, with General Yaakov Amidror, former National Security Advisor to Prime Minister Netanyahu, and a distinguished fellow at JINSA. I'm also joined by General Yaacov Ayish, the Josephson Senior VP here at JINSA for Israeli Affairs and a former head of IDF operations. Thanks for joining. I'm going to get right to it. I'm going to start with you, General Amidror. And I want to just step back for a second and just ask you, it's been very I want to start with what's been reported about the efforts to conclude a ceasefire deal in Gaza. I want to start there. And obviously, Secretary of State Blinken was just in Israel. He had a 3-hour meeting with Prime Minister Netanyahu, according to reports. I want to ask if you can make sense of what at least we're reading here in the United States, that it seems like Blinken or President Biden and Kamala Harris, Vice President Harris, just also had a conversation with Netanyahu. Seems like you see reports here, a senior U.S. official speaks to Netanyahu. Netanyahu supposedly, reportedly agrees to this U.S., what they call now a bridging proposal. And then about a day later, you see reports that suggest that that Netanyahu is holding firm on some of his positions. And let me just raise a couple that you obviously know about. That let me just recap for the audience. There have been several issues, at least that I'm aware of, based on reports that are supposedly holding up a deal. One is, well, who's going to control the Philadelphia corridor that separates Israel of Gaza, from Egypt? Reportedly, Netanyahu insists on Israeli control. There are questions about whether the Nitzarim corridor, which kind of cuts Gaza in half, and whether I think the vetting or the whether the vetting of Palestinians going north, or you could correct me, generals, on this. There are other questions about the reported 109 hostages that are left in Gaza, who is going to be released in the early days. Is it also going to be live Israelis or some also deceased? And I think there might be a couple other issues. It's just been really kind of confusing. Maybe you could enlighten us, General Amidror, of how you make of these reports that it seems like there's a deal, then there's not a deal. Netanyahu seems to agree with the U.S., but then doesn't seem to agree. What's going on? Do you have any?
What's going on is that in most of the reports, the media is reporting about something which is within Blinken and the Prime Minister. And in many cases, it is speculation of those who pretend to understand what's going on within the closed room. It is clear that there are two issues which are very important for Israel, and the Prime Minister is determined not to give it up. How far he is ready to go, what concessions he's ready to do in his demand, and so on and so forth, it's unknown. One issue is the corridor is Philadelphia, which is the lifeline of Hamas, through which they got all the munition, the weapon, and the ability to produce inside Gaza, because they smuggled in machinery which allowed them to do it inside Gaza. And this is something that Israel cannot allow to happen again. I mean, this is imperative. It's not for discussion. What we are discussing is how to find a way to square the circles, that we will not be on Philadelphia, so the Americans and Hamas will be satisfied. And at the same time, we will have control on the ability of Hamas to use the corridor, under the corridor and on the corridor. And if such a solution will be found, and Hamas will agree, we might have an agreement. I'm not sure that Hamas will be ready, because for Hamas, it's not about the symbol of controlling the corridor. It's about the ability to use the corridor to smuggle in whatever they want to rebuild their military capability. Hamas is in a problematic situation. No one asked himself, including all the audience here, what will be the reaction of Hamas for the assassination of Hania? Why? Because Hamas' military capability to react to this event is almost irrelevant. The more the war is going on, Hamas' military capability is becoming less relevant. But when Israel evacuates the Philadelphia, that will bring the new blood, the oxygen which Hamas needs. And this is why the Prime Minister is really determined not to do it. And he doesn't trust the optimism of some of the generals, which say, we can control it. Without being there, we can control it. Because I don't familiar with all the details of what was offered by the Americans, by the Egyptians, and so on and so forth, I don't have a strong view about it. But I agree that for the continuation of the ability of Israel to destroy Hamas in the future, which was promised by the Americans, the Americans gave the Prime Minister a letter that after the release of the first group, if will not be another group, he can go back to war. And for him, that was the most important demand. If it will be done when Philadelphia is not under Israeli control, and Hamas can smuggle in under the ground and on the ground whatever he wants, the going back to war will be very bloody. We will have to do many actions that we did in the past from the beginning, because we will meet at the battlefield regrouped forces of Hamas, which will have more capability based on what they will smuggle from the Philadelphia corridor. This is one argument. The second one is about Netzarim. Netzarim is less crucial, but more problematic. It's less crucial because Hamas cannot build anything new if Netzarim corridor will be abolished. They can move themselves from the south to the north. The problem is that it will be very close to Israeli communities in Sderot and other places, in Netiva Asara and all the others. And the IDF will not have the same freedom of action in the north part of Gaza when there will be a million civilians. And these are the numbers. So what the IDF and what the Prime Minister wants is to monitor the moving of the Palestinians into the north, to do it through checkpoints in which we identify who is who, and we not let terrorists go back to the north, and all the other Palestinians can go there. It will not make our work in the north easier, but at least we are not bringing terrorists into the north, which is very close, as I said, to some Israeli communities. These are the two main arguments. About the number of Palestinians that will be released, at the end, this is not the main issue.
Okay. I want to come back to you, General Amidror, but let me just go to General Ayish. I want to come back to General Amidror on these ceasefire talks. Let me ask you something, General Ayish, that General Amidror just referenced, and we read about it in the media, and there seems to be a divergence, according to the media, whether it's true or not, we don't know, between the Prime Minister and his negotiators on these talks, and the reports that General Amidror referred to, that the military seems to think that you don't have to have the IDF fully along the Philadelphia corridor, and that technology and other things could be helpful. I must say, after October 7th, the reliance on technology seems a little specious to me, but what do I know? I'm just asking you, how do you explain why the IDF thinks they could, or how do you understand the IDF, the senior IDF position on this?
Okay, I think General Amidror described precisely the tactical and operational implications of such a deal. And I'm afraid we are missing here something which is more at the strategic level, which is kind of a strategic crossroad where we are, because there is a direct linkage between a possible deal, hostages deal, not only with the situation in Gaza, and in a second I'll refer to what you were asking, but also to the situation in the north. Because to some extent we can see that the Iranians are restrained, and I'm not sure what are the reasons. Maybe we can shed some lights later on what are the Iranian reasons for that, and I would not be satisfied with the reason that they're deterred. I think it's far more than that. And עמידרור, והמיק שלך פתוח. And the second issue is not only the Iranian, is Hezbollah is waiting to see what is going on in the south. Should we reach an agreement with the US and we will have the hostages back, practically speaking, they are going for a ceasefire from their perspective, with an open case, which is Shuker. This is the strategic crossroad that, in fact, we are right in the middle. If we are going to have a deal, and in a second I'll talk about it, this is one thing. If not, we are going for a full-scale war in 7 fronts, and that's the thing that, to my opinion, we have to discuss. Now, regarding Philadelphia and the Netzarim corridor. The Netzarim corridor is really a heavy issue for one reason. Once you are pulling the IDF forces from there, you have another 1 million Palestinians going back to Gaza City and the Gaza neighborhoods. And I'm talking about the northern part, and Amidror already explained the vicinity to Israeli villages and so on and so forth. But at the same time, they are not just going back. I assume that we will see terrorists going back, as they are doing in civilian clothes, trying to rebuild and to regain control at the northern part. This is one heavy issue that we will have to deal with, and the IDF and the other organizations saying that it can be done. The other issue is Philadelphia. Until now, what was exposed on the Philadelphia axis is 180 tunnels. Now, not all of them are tunnels, highways from Egypt into Gaza and from Gaza back to Egypt. But this is the amount of tunnels. Some of them, by the way, were dug during the Morsi period above ground, and later on they fortified them with concrete and covered them with sand. 150 of them were demolished in the last operation. And when you are talking about the Rafah brigade, that, let me remind our audience, we were talking about them 2 months ago. This brigade is totally dismantled. Totally dismantled. Only in the last 24 hours, 50 terrorists were killed in the area of Rafah by the 162 division. So in that sense, I think the job is in the right direction, and it's not only the control that we have gained above ground and under the ground, and we are completing Tel Sultan and some other neighborhoods at that area right now. The big question is how we are going to solve it in the future. Now, regarding technology, we have to be very clear here. There was no technology whatsoever between Palestinian Rafah and Egyptian Rafah. So the rest of the technology that we can criticize is not there. Okay, the technology under the ground, the subsystem, the subterranean system that we have built is fully deployed, and no one has penetrated it, by the way. They have penetrated above ground.
Okay.
So it is something that at least worth to be considered for the future. They are trying to be creative, and I'm talking about the negotiators, about a settlement that will be fine with the Egyptians and with us. That's why they are talking about towers. They are talking about this type of control or other. And let me add few other options that are on the table. One is that you can cut Rafah, not necessarily on Philadelphia. You can cut Rafah, and we don't have a map here, between Khan Younis and Rafah, and simply seclude Rafah and stick it to the Egyptian side and make sure that the whole area between Khan Younis and Rafah is fully monitored. And then by that, you are avoiding the Egyptian challenge. But it's not good enough. There is another option, which is totally depends on cooperation with the Egyptians, and it has to be done with them. It is technology, military deployment, and so on and so forth. And it's also on the table. One thing is very clear. No one can leave Philadelphia axis without good control by Israel. Because by that, we are literally inviting Hamas and others to rebuild their capabilities. This is the line of oxygen. And what we have achieved until now can be rebuilt. Maybe it will take them 5 years, maybe it will take them 10 years. But once they have an open channel and open lines of communications, and to a certain extent secure, it's only a matter of resources and time, and we know exactly who is behind it. We can see Iran everywhere. So this is the issue with that. But going back to the first point, we have to consider it not only in terms of us and Hamas, but also the other fronts.
No, I appreciate that last point, General Ayish, and I do want to get back talk about Hezbollah and Iran, but I just wanted to delve into these details a little bit before we branch out. If I could just follow up with you, General Ayish, just on what you just said. So just to clarify, you think that Israel needs to have physical control of Philadelphia corridor. You don't think and I appreciate your point about the technology, that the subterranean technology actually has been effective, unlike the fence issue that on October 7th. But you think Israel needs to physically have troops on that border?
There is a military principle which is that is still valid till today. If you have an obstacle and no one controls it, it's like you don't have an obstacle. It doesn't matter if it is above ground or under the ground. That's why an Israeli presence, we can discuss what type of presence, have to be there for the day after. Without securing that border and some others, they'll be able to rebuild themselves. So definitely.
Just to clarify, I'm sorry, not just technology presence, but you think presence of soldiers have
physical
to be
and technological presence.
Okay. All right. Thank you. All right, General Amidror, let me ask you, if we just step back, and it's easy to get bogged down, and not that these are not important details. Obviously, they're very important. Obviously, the fate of the hostages, particularly the ones remaining who are alive, is obviously critical. But just stepping back, there've been so many efforts. It seems like the U.S. keeps saying this is the last chance to get a ceasefire deal. We've heard that a number of times, and yet do you see, and you've made the point clearly that Hamas, their military retaliation or fear that is, you're not really concerned about that right now, given what the IDF has done to it. But just stepping back for a second, are the fundamentals here of what's going on basically the same, or do you see a shift of some kind? Like there's been reports Hamas wants a deal now, they're going to be accommodating, or do you see pretty much things have pretty much been the same as they've been for a while now, and that's why you have no deal?
Silent.
Oh, we can't hear you, General. Sorry.
I don't know. and I think that other than the intelligence guys which have the resources, all what is appearing in the media is speculation and doesn't based on any knowledge. And when I don't have the knowledge, I don't speculate. I don't know.
Yeah.
I think that for the Americans, and this is why the Americans are so eager, it's more important than the ceasefire itself.
Right.
For them, it is a beginning of a process that's supposed to lead at the end. I don't know after what time, what schedule they have in their mind, but supposed to lead to a ceasefire in the north, to ceasefire with Iran, beginning of a process that supposed to bring back the Palestinians and the Israelis to negotiate, an agreement with Saudi Arabia, and new Middle East. I don't see any reason to believe that it might happen. I don't see the ceasefire leading to a real ceasefire in the north. Even if Hezbollah will stop its strikes into Israel, from the Israeli point of view, the fact that there is such a strong force north of Israel, kind of a loose cannon that might be used his capabilities in the next 7th of October, it is not a great achievement that there is a ceasefire in the north. On the contrary. For the Palestinians-Israeli conflict, I don't see not the Israeli side and not the Palestinian side ready to compromise about the beginning of something that might lead to discussions, leave alone an agreement. So I think that the Americans are too optimistic about their ability to lead to something much bigger. And this is, and because they, unlike me, believe that it is possible, they are putting all the pressure to begin the process, because the ceasefire is the beginning of the whole change that they have in mind.
Let me ask you, General Amidror, just follow up, but you just used the word pressure. And I hope you, thanks for joining us, even though you seem a little under the weather today. Do you, it seems like the pressure is about Israel needs to concede. Are there ways beyond whatever the IDF is doing? Are there ways you think that the U.S. could do more to pressure Hamas? Is there things they could be doing? Maybe give more weapons to Israel, put pressure on Iran? Are there things that, it seems like all the pressure is on Israel from the U.S., but I don't, are there things?
No, to be fair, I think that the cooperation, the military cooperation that Americans are promoting in the area, since it was known that the Iran and Hezbollah might retaliate, the infrastructure of the coalition that they build here is very strong. It's very prominent, and it gives Israel the ability to feel much, much better, and for the Iranians and Hezbollah to feel less so. And I think this is very important. So in a way, it's not a pressure, but it's not a direct pressure, but it is indirect pressure. And I think it's very important. Yes, the pressure about the Philadelphia corridor is mainly on Israel, because the asset is in the hands of Israel. And the Americans know that they don't have any leverage on Hamas. They can speak with the Egyptians, they can speak with the Qataris, but they don't have any real leverage on Hamas. And this is why they put most of the leverage on Israel, expecting Israel to compromise.
Okay. I want to, one more follow-up, General Amidror, on your other point about that the U.S. optimism. By the way, I think there'd also be political benefits to the administration if they'd work out a ceasefire. But I agree with you. That's how the administration looks at it. You don't, just to clarify, if for sake of argument was a ceasefire tomorrow agreement, you're saying even if Hezbollah would stop firing from the north, it doesn't really solve the problem that Israel faces in the north. I think it's important to really explain this because I don't think it's fully understood.
Look, the situation of the north now is as was the situation in the south before the 7th of October. Hezbollah is very strong. Its special forces in the ceasefire will come back to the border, very close to the Israeli communities and kibbutzim. And Israel will find itself in a peculiar situation in which the equivalent of what Hamas has had before the 7th of October is in the north part of Israel with Hezbollah. All the elements are there. The special forces, the ability to use fire, launching rockets, missiles, and so on, to surprise Israel because it's very close. It's immediate contact between the Israeli civilian communities and the border, and behind the border, the special forces of Hezbollah. So in a way, it is saying to the people in the north, guys, you are in the same situation of the people in the south in the 6th of October. And if Israel is ready to live like that, I'm not sure. Probably not. I hope not. And here is the question, what Israel should do. I'm preaching, as you know, for years to preemptive war, and we should do it. And even if it would be more quiet in the north after a ceasefire in the south, that cannot be excluded from our strategic vocabulary. When, how, this is for the decision makers. But in principle, Israel cannot allow Hezbollah to continue to have this strength and capabilities very close to the Israeli border.
And they have to create, right? They have to create at least a buffer zone you're referring to, right? Or
what will be the aims of such a war? It's a good question. One of them is a buffer zone, but this is not the most important part.
Okay. I generalize. Let me ask you. So we're talking about the north, and you referred to it earlier. So you believe you're suggesting, unless there's some quiet ceasefire in the south, you think then the Iranians or Hezbollah will now? Do you think they're waiting now? Is how you understand it, to see if there is a ceasefire, and if there isn't, then you think this will be the time when Hezbollah at least will retaliate for Israel's killing of the number 2 person in Hezbollah?
Well, I think there are a few ways to look at it. When we are talking about Hezbollah, the question is not an if, it's when.
Yeah.
And I think we said it many times in our webinars. The war with the Hezbollah is imminent. Now, the big question that we have to ask ourselves is it the right time now? And there are many reasons why we can do it now or should do it now. And there are many reasons why we should do it in a different time period. But definitely, as I said at the beginning, it has its own linkage to the story with the Hamas and with the hostages. Assume that we will go to do an arrangement with them. This is one thing. If not, it's only a matter of time. My advice, I think that the opportunity that we had in October was missed. And I was very happy to hear Amidror talking about a preemptive approach, but that opportunity was missed when we had the highest legitimacy, the highest support internationally, the highest readiness, and the highest, we didn't do it. And right now, we have to consider it very carefully, because as I said, it's imminent, but we can, if we can choose the time, I think it's better to do it in the near future once we did all the preparations and once we closed the Hamas and the Gaza case.
Okay, let me ask General Amidror then, and I know you can't divine what the Iranians are thinking, and you've made this point, General Amidror, a couple of times, that one thing that April 13th and 14th, their attack of 350 missiles and drones at Israel indicates is that the Iranians are more unpredictable than we thought, or we don't understand them as much. But accepting that, have you been surprised at all by the so far lack of retaliation by the Iranians and Hezbollah? Do you see it tied to these talks, the ceasefire talks, or is it really also response to the threats coming out of Israel and the movement of a lot of assets, military assets by the United States to the region, and that has helped deter action so far? How do you explain it?
I think, as you said, I don't know, but I think that the Iranians are facing the problem. They understand that to save their face, they need to do something. I mean, the assassination of someone who was invited by the regime to the safe house of the regime in Tehran, it's like killing someone in the bear house. But he's a Palestinian. I don't want to be a racist, but he's a Palestinian. He's not an Iranian. The assassination was done in a way that maybe it was domestic work of someone. It is not like the bombing of the Iranian embassy or consulate in Damascus, which was done by the Air Force, admitted by Israel immediately, and that was direct attack on Iranian people, on Iranian very senior people. Here it's another story, and they don't want a war for that. And how to find something after the launch 300 projectiles and didn't succeed, to find something that will give them something on top of what was achieved in the 300 missiles. It's very complicated when you don't want the war. You want the war, it's easy. But if you don't want the war, and I think that they don't want the war. They are not ready for war, they don't want the war. The fact that Americans moved assets to the Middle East is helping them to ask themselves, okay, what will be the benefit? What will be the price? So I think between all these elements, the Iranians are puzzling and didn't find a good solution yet.
Okay. I'd actually like to shift from the military situation. I wanted to ask General Ayish something that is actually aside from this. Some struck me that, we have the Democratic Convention here this week in Chicago, and except for the appearance of his two parents of one of the hostages, Israel actually hasn't been mentioned much. President Biden talks about, people talk about hostages, they don't say Israeli hostages. Biden didn't mention Israel. He mentioned that the demonstrators have a point. The protesters, the anti-Israel, pro-Hamas demonstrators outside. Yet I wonder, something struck me in Israel also in the last couple of days. There reports, I think that Israel discovered, 6 bodies, about 6 dead hostages that they recovered. I think I read that the autopsy report suggested bullet holes. And some struck me in my head a couple of weeks ago. I think it was the evening right after Tisha B'Av, so I guess that was 2 weeks ago. And there was a lone soldier that was killed, that died, I think from an allergic reaction. And the parents couldn't come because I think they're American, if I recall, not sure. And they asked people to come to his funeral. And after the fast, the Tisha B'Av fast, I read there was 2,000 or 3,000 people that came to his funeral.
That's
and
nice.
they didn't know him, right? And I just think it's worth, if you don't mind addressing this, because I think it's hard for Americans, I'm speaking for myself, to fully understand how Israelis are thinking about things still after October 7th. A lot of the world has moved on from October 7th. But in Israel, it seems like there's been a shift here that persists in the society. And I just thought maybe you could talk about that a little bit, because that's a striking thing to happen. General Ayish? Yeah.
Okay, so first of all, Jordan, this is the name of the soldier, was the soldier of my son, Aviatar, in a Gaza unit, and later on he moved to the reconnaissance battalion in the Nachal Brigade. A wonderful guy, by the way. And when the war started, he decided that he have to join his unit, arrive to Israel, did his part as a reservist, and unfortunately, he later on died from an allergic reaction or complication, something like that. And then the call came. And I think it's a very clear and strong, genuine reflection of how strong and unite is the Israeli society, behind the IDF, behind its missions. And it's not a matter of knowing Jordan or someone else. This is the sense of unity. You can find it, by the way, everywhere. When you are thinking about the numbers of Israelis that flew back to Israel for not only joining back the military or the reserve unit, just to help, it's unbelievable. But I think it's a very genuine reflection. And we saw it, by the way, also during 2014 in Operation Protective Edge. When he had that funeral in Haifa, also by an American lone soldier, the same. People in Israel know to appreciate that level of commitment and devotion. And this is our way, at the end of the day to show it.
Okay. Thank you. I think it's, we generally talk about military.
If you want to look at it from another perspective, today it was published. The IDF published the percentage of recruiting volunteers to the military units they're doing it three times a year. Now it's the summer one. In almost all the fighting units, it is more than 100%. So for every place in the Golani, in Givati, in the armor brigade, there are more people than IDF needs, and that will allow us to build the empty units which lost many of their soldiers much earlier than we expected, because now we have more volunteers to those units. It's impressive to see. It's true about men and women as well, to all the fighting units in the IDF.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a good time to mention that the Armor Corps, the level of volunteers to the Armor Corps is higher than the paratroopers, is higher than the Golani Brigade, is higher than the Nachal Brigade. It's unbelievable, by the way, what is going on there.
Why is that?
I think after 10 months of fighting together, people, soldiers realized all type of capabilities, and they want to contribute as much as they can. And that's how they evaluate what they have seen. And they hear their friends, they hear their families, they hear it from reservists. And it's unbelievable. As General Amidror said, all of them are above 100%. It means that you have on certain positions 2 soldiers. On certain positions, you have 3 soldiers. And you have, to decide who is going where.
And this is not the special forces or the pilots corps.
Yeah, we are talking regular combat units.
Yes, the combat units.
But General Ice, you mentioned, so why would the Armored Corps though have a higher than some?
I think
I
their
understand that
performance.
you have an
No.
affinity for them, of course, also.
Yeah, absolutely. As the 7th Armored Brigade commander, they have suffered from a bad image for many years, that their part in the battle is not so significant. And I think what people have seen in the last 10.5 months is pretty amazing. And they know that it's all a matter of, being able to finding in a combined way together. And this is what we see.
Okay. Look, actually, this is all I wanted to ask. Just to conclude, I'll turn to General Amidror. Do you have anything you want to raise that I didn't raise earlier? But we can't hear you. Are we still mute? You're muted, General Amidror.
I think that the real pressure now in Israel is about the situation in the north. It is clear to most of the Israelis that in Gaza, the success of the IDF is understood. In spite, as was published in the New York Times, in spite the assessment of the Americans about the number of casualties, the ability of Israel to dismantle Hamas, and so on and so forth, the IDF almost did it. It's almost done. The main issue now is how to bring back the 80 or more thousand Israelis which had been evacuated or evacuated themselves from the north, because for that we probably have to make a big war, and for big war you have to be ready psychologically and practically. And this is the main challenge now for Israel, how to deal with the 80,000 refugees in Israel.
And by the way, General Aish, it seems like Israel is, I mean, I know that Hezbollah fired about 50 missiles the other day against Katrin, but Israel seems to be being very aggressive with Hezbollah, hitting these depots deep into Lebanon, arms depots, I mean, of Hezbollah and so on. They seem to...
Hezbollah is paying a very heavy price. We tend to speak about the infrastructure and the implications operationally, and also about what they are doing, shooting towards villages and cities in Israel. But we have to remember, Hezbollah have lost more than 500 operatives so far. It's a pretty remarkable number when you are thinking about the number of commanders that they have lost. On the tactical level, it's pretty significant. And when you are adding on that layer the fact that we are really removing certain operational capabilities from the front, and in the last few months, not only at the front, also in the area of Sidon, Tzor, Bekaa Valley, it seems like they are realizing that we are literally peeling certain capabilities, and we can do more. Having said that, we didn't achieve full deterrence as we wanted, and that's why, to my opinion, it's just a matter of time that we will see a total war with Hezbollah. That threat have to be removed. It's only a matter of when, even not a matter of how. I don't see any other option, unfortunately. And right now, if we will be able to close the war in the south, it will be a significant achievement, because we wanted to dismantle Hamas military capabilities, to destroy his infrastructure, to remove his military leadership and his other leadership. Basically, we have achieved most of it. We have to complete it with an alternative solution for someone to control the Gaza Strip, to make sure that they are isolated in terms of being able to replenish and to rebuild themselves, and then to move on, strategically speaking, to the other fronts.
Okay. All right. Well, look, thank you both very much for sharing about it. I want to thank everybody for joining us today. And obviously, we'll have another session next week. We'll see if there's a ceasefire before then. And please, everyone, keep looking out for all the work that JINSA is putting out about what's been going on in the region. So thank you, General Amidror. Thank you, Ayish. Thank you for staying up late. And
Thank you. Thank you.
I feel better.
Bye.
Okay, bye. Go.